quantum computing is a whole other level that will allow much more power, much more speed, the likes of which we have not seen. Online Education Foundations was my attempt to bring together a lot of my previous work. So the last 20, 25 years, I've written dozens of articles, about 14 books, usually looking at some aspect of technology or online learning. So this book allowed me to bring all that work together in one place. So you'll see a lot of history, you'll see theoretical frameworks, you'll see pedagogical models, you'll see planning, you'll see case studies of colleges that I think have done some good work. And so it was very important for me to try and bring everything together in one place. And I think it worked out very well. For my students, while I pay a lot of attention to the pedagogy and their outcomes, I think for them, all of whom are adults who have full-time jobs, many of whom have families, and they combine in very busy days getting a graduate degree, working full-time. So when I started teaching online, and particularly in the blended model, many times they only have to come one night a week. Sometimes they don't have to come at all, and we do all the work online. And they're very appreciative of that. It fits into their very busy lives to be able to have the convenience of taking courses when they can at their homes, in their places of business, etc. If you're going to look at best examples, look at institutions that have invested significantly and wisely into the whole package they're providing the students. And I would say you can start looking at your own institution here, Drexel University. They've invested significant money in terms of the student counseling, the student advisement, those kind of back office pieces that make for a very successful program. I would look at the work, for instance, that comes out. There's a group at the University of Central Florida. It's a Center for Research on Effective Practices in Teaching and Learning. They've done a lot of wonderful work, particularly in the use of technology and particularly the use of online technology. They invested heavily in terms of collecting data on students so they can develop a study and they have an N of 150,000 students, but they're also using very good techniques to analyze that. So that would be one place I would look. If you're looking at or considering, let's say, large-scale opinions about how higher education is doing in online learning, there's a group called the Babson College Survey Research Group. They did like 12, 13 national surveys of chief academic officers to get a sense of how is online learning evolving and being deployed in their institutions. It's a wonderful, wonderful depository of how online learning has evolved over the last 15 or so years. There was a study funded by the United States Department of Education, published in 2010, but it was one of the first major meta-analyses of online and face-to-face learning. And that study is a little bit dated, it came out in 2010, but I think it was a very important, pivotal study in terms of what's happened with online technology and teaching and learning in this country. You try and tap into what they already know. You ask them to bring their experiences into whatever the activity is. I think that's a very, very powerful way to get the students engaged. They're not just talking about the teacher's material, they're talking about their own material. And then they think about it, and then I can develop follow-up questions based upon what they're interested in and what they can relate to. And I think, again, this ties into what I said earlier, this kind of theory of having them own the course a bit. And I found that very successful. Passive media basically it's kind of a listening. I mean, the The main focus of that is have the students listen. And I mean, there's a lot of very good lecturers, people who can lecture well. But I don't think that you should build a course around lecture. That's a very passive environment, and unless you're very good about it and you can bring in some humor and do some tapping into a student's interest somehow or another, it could be boring. And I've always advised people who've asked me this kind of question, well, you could take that lecture in an online environment, but chunk it, like break it up into some logical 6, 7, 8-minute segments, and then introduce some activity that forces the students to do something. Answer a question, discuss what you just heard, respond to it, and that's more of an interactive environment. And it's not difficult to do. The most recent thing I saw it's called At Play in the Cosmos, which is kind of astronomy and what have you. What I like about it, besides being well done, and I think pedagogically sound, it has a wonderful textbook associated with it, so that it isn't just watching it. And as interesting as it might be, there's other things built into it. And still you have the textbook that provides a kind of foundation. And it depends upon what age you're talking about. Ph.D, he's been working on something called the River City. He basically directs it mostly to high school students, but it's a full gamut of everything that goes on in a city, and making decisions about what you have to do because of whatever occurs and what have you. MIT is coming up with something called ELUDE, E-L-U-D-E, and I've only seen parts of it, but it's talking about how to deal with depression. How do young people as well as adults deal with depression? I think we need a lot of that in our society, and it's in a game format. If you want to look at the younger kids, look at Fortnite. I think half the population under 16 is playing Fortnite. And I had a wonderful experience this past Christmas when my grandson was visiting me. He taught me how to play Fortnite, and we played Fortnite for hours, and he's completely committed to it. Well, this may sound easy, but to me there's elegance in simplicity. I'm not talking about a course that's, some companies spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on, but something me as a faculty member could do with maybe the assistance of an instructional designer, that I like to have a very clean format to my online courses. Students have no difficulty understanding where things are. I don't have 30 buttons that they could choose. Generally I have a rule of no more than 6 or 7 or 8 buttons, all of which are very clearly labeled as to what you can do with that particular facility. And I think that the students appreciate, particularly those in the fully online environment, they appreciate looking at the format and saying, okay, I understand what I have to do here. And if I may be so bold to quote from someone, but Albert Einstein once was quoted as saying, if I can read this, any intelligent fool can make things bigger, more complex, and more violent. It takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. So my advice is, make it simple, don't make it complex. And don't jump at every new technological this, that, and whatever, and feel you have to use it. If it makes good pedagogical sense, fine. In the next 10 or so years, we'll see evolutionary changes that, based upon what we're doing now, we'll see more adaptive technology. We'll probably see more learning analytics used. We'll see cloud computing start to mature a bit more than it has already. Very, very beginnings of some kind of AI applications, maybe. We will see nanotechnology, which everyone is really, impressed and to some degree pleased with, on how much it has enhanced all of our digital technology. That will start giving way to quantum computing. Quantum computing is a whole other level of digital circuitry design that will allow much more power, much more speed, the likes of which we have not seen in digital technology. When that comes, that opens up lots of other possibilities in applications like artificial intelligence, like robotics, like cloud computing. All of these will be significantly enhanced as we move to a quantum computing type environment. When that happens, we will see a whole other level of digital activity, not just in teaching and learning, but everything we do.